Good morning, traders. Thanks for joining me. It's 8:01 a.m. on Wednesday, the 27th of August, 2025. You might hear that the sound's a little bit different. I'm in a conference room that's very echoey on just a regular earbud type of microphone. I'm traveling. I'm hailing at you from Medellin, Colombia. I want to remind you that derivatives trading is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results. How's the sound? Is it terrible? Anyway, doing my best to stay up to speed with the markets and with everybody that's listening while I'm traveling. So this is experimental. Hopefully it'll go smoothly. Let's take a look at what the market is looking like this morning. The key thing to note is, of course, NVIDIA earnings today. They're basically the monster across the major indices, and so the market's likely to experience a fair bit of volatility on the report today after the close. So that's what you need to keep an eye on. Also, we get HP today after the close. That's also expected to move things along. Other than that, let's see. It looks like my volumes are a little bit light here. Let's see what's going on. Current session, there we go. So the overall sentiment's mixed. You could see the S&P's down 3.5 points from prior settlement. Not much there. Volume's really light. The volume that I see on my Edge Pro X platform is actually 88,000. And that's running about 59% of relative volume. So very, 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 very quiet session with really, really tight range. We are a stone's throw away in the S&P from the all-time highs. From the all-time highs, so the market's just in a kind of a wait and see posture currently. Other than that, there's a bunch of news. I'm not going to go through this sheet in detail. I'm more interested in the technical side, and that is relative range is awful. Relative volume is pretty bad. The market's pretty much unchanged, with a plus or minus, 10 basis points with the Russell pulling back. The Russell was quite strong yesterday, and the Russell's down 31 basis points or 7.5 points, which isn't much. Crude oil has come off of the 65 handle, tested the 63 handle, and is holding steady in the middle. Crude oil doing as expected. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So again, we're in a holding pattern. Looking at the S&P, we have a bit of a multi-distribution profile, but really it's really imbalanced. We're trading, we're teetering. We've created a distribution above prior settlement, and now we're trading below prior settlement, and it's quite sideways. I wouldn't read too much into that. Volume again at 89,000 contracts. The inventory is 50% long, not much, and the range is 11.5 points. How disastrous is that? 11.5 points. Market's just dead asleep. So that's what we've got in terms of the calendar events for today. Crude oil inventories for those who are trading crude at 10:30 as usual. Fed's barking at 12:45 Eastern. And then we have a 70 billion 5-year note auction at 1. We get the South Korean interest rate decision this evening. And of course, I want to bring your attention to the accelerator program link and QR code at the bottom if you're interested in participating in that. The registrations for that close pretty soon as there's limited seating, and it starts in about 2.5 weeks. So, or is it 3 weeks? September 16th, basically. So that's what we've got. Let's take a look at the technicals. So I want to start with just a little bit of just an overview of the main products that I trade or I'm interested in. And that is ESN, QCL, and GC. Of course, I want to remind you that if you're trading these products and you're still gaining experience, to trade the micros, which are MES, MNQ, MCL, and MGC. You could see that the delta has been negative throughout the session. There's not much participation except for early on for the large lots, the very large lots. We are below the full session VWAP and trending down on price and delta. So to me, though, again, given the volume, remember, volume confirms price. Given the volume, I'm not going to read too much into it. The NQ spent most of the session positive on delta. It's currently under the full session VWAP, under settlement, and is pushing lows. We're seeing some collisions coming in. We see some very large lots stepping in, and the delta is turning negative on that. Crude oil, most of the session pretty much unchanged, currently sitting above the full session VWAP, positive delta. At the peak, it's pretty decent positive delta, but currently the crude is open. It's 8 minutes into the open on crude, and it's still kind of just, you can see the very large lot participation is just not there. Just seems disinterested on GC. The GC has spent pretty much the entire session in negative delta territory and is trading sideways, not much participation from very large lots. So that tells me that it's a day that is likely to be controlled by short time frame traders, and we're in a holding pattern. Here's the composite, the daily composite. You could see very close to all-time highs here at 65.0875. Yesterday we ended up rallying a little bit back, and then today we're holding steady. And what we're doing is we're holding a flag pattern. This is relatively bullish overall on a multi-day basis. We did try to get down and test into that 63.50 area and held. We put in a low of like 63.62 or something like that. Let's see what that number is. Yep, 62.75 and 63.64. So low, inside day, higher low, and then we're right back in the upper distribution, and this looks like it has sucked in enough energy to push through highs. Remember, this is the last week of the month. We're above the monthly VWAP here in the S&P. Looking at crude, crude has been just an extremely interesting trade, but it has compressed quite a bit. Crude has made a nice run for the 76s, and since then it has had a really hard time holding the 68 range, and then the 65 now is showing a fair bit of resistance. So crude is just kind of skimming, has been skimming the 61, 62 handle. Yesterday it went to 63, and the 63 handle we're holding steady in crude. NASDAQ showing a fair bit of relative weakness, although it still remains near highs. You can see the NASDAQ hasn't really pulled back all that much. It's really sitting in a sort of a balanced area here. Has put in an all-time high of 24,068, and right now it is lagging the S&P. The S&P is trading way up here on a flag. The NASDAQ has pulled back to this major support zone, and then it's just sitting sideways. NASDAQ's teetering on the monthly VWAP. Again, it's relatively weaker. Here's gold. Gold really struggling to get through the 35.50. Is completely sideways. And is forming a wedge. Gold is likely to break away from here in a relatively violent way, I would expect. There's quite a bit of weak structure. You can see below gold right here on the profile. You can see there's a fair bit of weak structure into the 30, 50, and a 3,000 balance, which is this consolidation that we got earlier in the year, just as the tariff craziness began. So currently, with the dollar, the dollar's been falling off. The dollar's value is falling against the other currency baskets, but overall, gold is just holding steady. It's had some pretty strong back and forth. Given the action in the S&P, so back to the S&P on an intraday basis. I'm going to check again. Is the sound okay for you guys? On an intraday basis, the S&P has pushed down into the 6450 area, has dipped below into 6430. If you recall, last Monday I talked about that 6430. If it gives up the consolidation range in the 6470 area, 6430 is the likely test, and it went to 6430.75, 6430.75. And since then, what we did yesterday is to sit sideways in the overnight session, and then we had a pretty decent base actually as we broke higher from where we traded most of the overnight session, and then had a pullback into DGPs, and then basically staged a higher low. This is important. This zone here that you see highlighted is relatively important. This consolidation from which the rally has pushed is something to watch out for. So I'm, overall bullish here. The overnight session had multiple taps at the overnight high or near there. It looked relatively weak to me, and it has kind of drooped off since basically I made this comment this morning in the Convergent chat room that the weak high is very evident in the S&P. But overall, we're adrift. This is basically a raft without a motor or a paddle or a sail or anything. It's basically just kind of drifting around. We do have a little bit of weak structure underneath this in the S&P. We didn't put in any singles. You can see the 30-minute bars right here are overlapping. So they actually traded in an orderly way. They didn't create a decent distribution to shoot up from, but they did that below, and that's why I'm highlighting this area. So a retest, as long as the 64, 65 area stays intact here, this high is very vulnerable. The high from last week at 64.96 and the 65.08.75 high is also vulnerable. So I'm skewing to the long side unless it gets back below 64.65. Now, if we open today and we make a drive into that 64.65 area, this creates an opportunity for a very short-term long from this base. I believe that the low here with the excess low overnight, these higher lows that it has put in, this is clear structure that buyers are in control. So to me, this looks like it is pulling back, sucking in some more energy for a run-up. We are unfortunately on top of the MCV-POC. You can see the MCV-POC, this pink tag right here, the MCV-POC for this entire region is right here in the 64.70 area. So that acts as a magnet, but overall, I'm going to treat it like bounce this morning. Very likely sitting on hands. I would recommend sitting on hands unless you see something very, very clear to act on. I doubt there will be much clarity early on, but we'll see. Maybe we'll get a push. But given the overnight action, I'm just not seeing why anybody would stick their neck out at this point until this thing breaks one way or another. So where's my pointer? Okay, so what are we looking at for today? looking at it you could see that we're right on top of the MCV POC, very likely to get drawn down in there, and then make our way back up. And then with NVIDIA coming out, the market's going to treat that pretty aggressively, whatever they come up with, especially this last controversy over the chips being held in China, or being China basically moving to say, don't buy chips from NVIDIA. So the guidance is going to be very important. So I'm looking for this thing to really tackle the overnight high and squeeze, but not without pulling back into our support zones. That's the primary scenario for today. The secondary scenario is a little more bearish. I have very little control over this mouse, to be honest with you. There's like a little bit of a lag because of the broadcast. I'm on a laptop that's not all that powerful. I left my monstrous laptop at home because it's so heavy. So the secondary scenario is to fall back in line, move back to prior settlement for the 75% stat, and then squeeze down into our zone, basically pulling back, taking back what it ran from yesterday, and then hold steady on the MC point of control. I do not expect this to sell off, barring any surprises, any news, geopolitical or otherwise. I don't expect this thing to sell off all that much. So that's, I'm going to want to impress upon you that today is a good day to just exercise caution. Don't try to catch the move as it happens. In the beginning, there are likely to be false starts, as evidenced by the very, very poor relative range and relative volume in the overnight session. There's just a lot of disinterest here. So this is a market that's easier for short-term traders to push around, okay? Because it looks to me like short-term traders are in control. So that's the ES. NQ is going to follow the same logic here. Let's pull up the NQ 30-minute intraday chart. That's the chart we look at for plans. You can see the NQ has tested and hit. I haven't touched these levels since last week. These areas here, these are longer term support resistance type levels. You can see that they held up pretty good on the retest on Monday night session, coming into yesterday's session. And then we're at the upper end of the upper bound, and we are basically sitting here again, not in the highest balance because the MC point of control is way up here, but the NQ is relatively quite weak. It has not come off this bottom very well. It put in a nice rounded bottom. We did have an excess low that was retested with a higher low, and then we shot up. And then what we did yesterday is very, very different than what the S&P did, in that it had this kind of coiling piece where I would normally highlight this as today's key over-under zone, but it didn't really make much of an effort to rally and take out those previous highs. And in the overnight session, it's just completely sideways. So the NASDAQ looks very disinterested currently. It looks, and the NASDAQ is going to be very, very impacted by whatever comes out of NVIDIA. So just a word of caution again, I'd rather see you sit on your hands than lose money, or worse, which is what commonly happens, which is to get yourself in trouble and then spend the rest of the day trying to dig yourself out of a hole, only to make the hole bigger with commissions and clearing fees and exchange fees and whatnot. So it's better to just wait for A-plus setups and trade those than to throw yourself in and then have to try to save yourself later. Crude, again, as I said, tested the 65, failed to hold the 65. This was completely expected. And then what it did, though, You know, the expectation here is that it puts in this impulse higher. It finished above 1 vol of sigma, and you'd expect it the next day to at least try for the next stock zone, which is 65.20. It did not do that. The overnight session ended up walking right back below our balance zone. So this is the top of balance. Is this? You can see there's a tag here in our master levels. The top of balance is also this red resistance zone, and it fell back into this August balance zone. And since then, it has formed a consolidation at the low, and I marked that consolidation in the overnight session as the immediate over-under. So we've formed a base. This is important. We've formed a base, and we've resolved to the upside. That becomes a really important reference area to me. So what I'm expecting here, given that it opened, tested the resistance that we have here, which this area has been here for quite some time on this chart, it tested that and came off, and my expectation is it's likely to dip into the overnight coiling zone here, and most likely crude is getting inventory, most likely sit sideways until inventories come out. So there's a little bit more room to the downside for crude, but there's quite a bit to get through in this base from prior settlement at 63.25 all the way down into the 63 handle. This area here is expected to provide a fair bit of support. If it breaks through this on poor inventories or whatever, or excess inventories, then we have a pretty good shot at 61.50 below. Crude, you know, giving us a pretty good structure to trade from this morning. I'll leave you with that. A quick reminder, right in the live chat, I put a link for an event that's taking place today. It is the AMA. We're going to talk about how to best make progress. You know, are you stuck in the mud? What is going on with your progress? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the accelerator program. That's happening at 1 p.m. today. The link is in the video description, the video summary, as well as in the live chat. Hopefully you'll join us. My intent is to just be very, to take whatever questions you have about where you are in terms of trading and your progress, and to be very transparent about what it takes. Good luck, and I will catch you later on today. Cheers.